we are always going to be exposed to dictators like Putin and petrostates and others because gas is sold on an international market. So we import very little gas from Russia, but we're still subject to these extreme price pressures which families and businesses are facing. What's the way through that? Clean, homegrown power.
Well, COP27 is getting underway in Egypt today with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak now, after a U-turn, in attendance. World leaders and officials are aiming to get back on track with commitments made in Glasgow last year, while also dealing with the consequences of the energy crisis facing many nations. And Ed Miliband joins us now, the environment spokesman for the Labour Party. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, great to be with you, Adam.
Do you hold out any hopes for this COP meeting? Are we going forwards or backwards in terms of implementing what's needed to slow down global warming?
I think the truth is that we've gone backwards somewhat in the last year since COP26. You know, lots of promises, grand promises were made there. The UN tells us we're heading 2.8 degrees of global warming, which would be disastrous. And we're in the middle of an energy bills crisis. But the key thing, Adam, that I think Rishi Sunak should be taking to this COP, and I will be taking when I go, and the Labour government will be taking in a much more committed way than Rishi, is that it now is cheaper to save the planet than to destroy it. In other words, renewable energy, solar, wind, other zero carbon sources of power are much cheaper than fossil fuels. So at one level, it feels quite depressing, candidly. But at another level, I see big opportunity for the world to move faster than people might think towards that clean energy that we need to cut bills as well as tackle the climate crisis.
You didn't mention nuclear, isn't that in that category as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nuclear is part of our mix. And if you look at our commitment to have zero carbon power by 2030, a lot of it is provided by renewables. Nuclear plays a role, and new nuclear is definitely part of the mix going forward. There was some rumours on a couple of days ago that the government was going to abandon its commitment to the Sizewell project. I think that would be a mistake. So new nuclear absolutely is part of it. And this combination of zero carbon sources, and it's really important to say this. If I'd been talking to you a decade ago, we probably did talk a decade ago about this, Adam, I'd be saying the ethical choice is to go green. Now I can say to you confidently that the ethical choice and the economic choice is to go green.
Well, I certainly remember talking to you in Copenhagen. I can't remember if that was a decade ago.
More than a decade ago. It makes us very old.
Okay. But what about the process itself? Because it is an attempt by the United Nations to get all of the world coming together. But we know last time round that India and China reduced Alex Sharma to tears. We know this time round that they're going to be quite a lot of no-shows. I mean, isn't the truth, and perhaps even in this country, that the immediate pressures of the energy crisis coming out of Ukraine and the slowing down of economies mean that actually governments are giving this a lesser priority?
Well, look, the process is incredibly messy, this UN process, as I saw at Copenhagen and you did, and as we saw last year at COP26. But it's the best process we've got. What is the challenge of the climate crisis? The challenge is that it is a genuinely global problem. Unless everyone acts, then we're not going to address it. The one thing I'd pick you up on, though, and it is really important to say this, that yes, some countries will be putting it on the back burner because of the energy crisis, but that's the wrong approach. Because how do we get out of the energy bills crisis? The same way as we tackle the climate crisis, by getting off fossil fuels. You see, we are always going to be exposed to dictators like Putin and petrostates and others because gas is sold on an international market. So we import very little gas from Russia, but we're still subject to these extreme price pressures which families and businesses are facing. What's the way through that? Clean, homegrown power. Now, I'm afraid I don't see Rishi Sunak as very committed on this. He wasn't sure he was going to go to COP. He wants to carry on blocking onshore wind, which is the cheapest form of power available. He wants lots of new fossil fuel licenses, which are certainly not the answer. So I think making good on that reality, that truth, that clean power is now the cheapest form of power, is what we need to do, and all countries need to do. And we should be building alliances to make that happen.
Ed Miliband, do you think that countries like the UK should feel guilty about their impact on climate change?
You mean historically, Katie?
Yeah, I do mean historically, but
I
I
think,
mean in the
I think,
context of what's happening in the rest of the world. Do you think that we should feel guilty?
I
And
think we
calls for
have
reparations.
well, hang on. A couple of things here. The way I'd put it is we should feel a responsibility. I don't personally like the language of reparations. It takes you to a whole sort of area of sort of kind of controversy. Here's how I would put it. When you see countries across the world who are incredibly vulnerable, Pakistan recently had floods which saw 30% of the country underwater, we all have a responsibility collectively to act on that. Just like, when we see problems here at home, we have a responsibility to act. It's in our moral interests to act internationally. It's also in our economic and self-interest, because unless we bring countries with us in tackling this problem, we're never going to sort it. So I think responsibility, yes, and doing our fair share.
I want to bring it back to the economic situation in the UK, because one thing that you've talked about repeatedly as the Labour Party when it comes to your green agenda is the link with the windfall tax and how much money you're going to raise from that. How long would you keep the windfall tax on those big companies going for?
Well, the government, we'll set that out at the election, Kate, but the government has said 2025, and we think that's the right thing to do. But obviously, we'll set out the fuller tax policy, including for the next parliament, including the windfall tax then. But at the moment, the critical thing is this. We need a proper windfall tax. You see, Shell announced near record profits this week, but curiously, they're not paying any windfall tax. It's not curious, though, because Rishi Sunak built in a massive loophole to his windfall tax, which for fossil fuel companies to say, actually, you don't really need to pay it if you do certain things. Now,
Well, hang on. You call that you say that's a loophole. Conservative
yeah,
MPs, including Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, would say, well, actually, that's investment. What they're getting those companies to do is to put money into investment, often in green technology, which is what you're
no,
championing.
it's not in green technology. It's actually, if you look at what they're doing, Kate, they're spending, I think, something like 6 times more on share buybacks than they are on low carbon investment. It's a tiny proportion of actually what the investment they're making. Actually, what it's doing, the incentive he introduces, only for oil and gas. It's only for new drilling of oil and gas. Why is that not the answer? Because it will make no difference to price, because gas is sold internationally on the international market. It will take years to come to fruition. It's actually much slower than renewables to come into line, and it drives the coach and horses for our climate commitments.
I
As Alex
suppose
Sharma.
the bigger point I'm making here is that you need these companies to work with you in order to achieve the ambitions that you're talking about. And at the moment, what you're saying is that you want to tax them and you want to keep doing that for quite a long time. Don't you think that might disincentivize them from making the investments that you need them to?
No, I don't. And the reason I don't think that is because this is about unearned and unexpected profits. If you think about the debate of the last year or so, Kate, we called for a windfall tax in January. Rishi Sunak resisted, and then eventually succumbed. Why? Because even he recognized that these weren't the kind of long-term profits that companies expected to make. This is profits that were being made simply because, well, there was a worldwide crisis caused post-COVID, but also then exacerbated by Putin's aggression, Putin's war.
Oh, we're losing the line slightly, Ed. But I just want to ask you two quick things before we let you go. There is a suggestion today that nurses may well go on strike over pay before Christmas this year. Do you support that? Oh,
Don't think he's there.
I think we've lost Ed Miliband. That's a shame, because I wanted to ask him about whether Labour would support the nurses' strike. We obviously don't know whether that strike's going to go
ask
ahead
him
yet.
whether he'd go into the jungle as well.
Well, I also, because he's turned down Strictly Come Dancing in the past, because he says he can't dance, but I'm interested to see if he would turn down going into the jungle. But that's a shame. We've lost Ed Miliband. But
Would
interesting.
You go into the jungle, by the way?
Would I go into the jungle? No.
You wouldn't. I wouldn't either. I can't stand snakes.
I mean, I don't think either of us would ever be asked, Adam, but no, I wouldn't. I mean, interesting there to hear Ed Miliband talking about COP and how optimistic he is for COP, because a lot of politicians aren't optimistic about what it's going to achieve. And you mentioned Alex Sharma ending up in tears last time round of frustration because countries like China and others just don't want to play ball.
Well, they do and they don't. I mean, they still attend these meetings. And, China, for example, has said that it needs coal for its development, but on the other hand, it has cut back on investing
I think we
in
have
coal mining.
We have Ed
elsewhere.
Miliband back. Ed Miliband, you can't escape the Strictly Come Dancing
I
question,
know.
but
I'm only. Can you hear me? I'm only audio now, but I do have a sort of face for radio, so it's very appropriate.
Well, look, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about the nurses' strike, because there is a suggestion that nurses will walk out because of pay, because of the pay demands have not been met before Christmas. What is your position on that? Do you support nursing staff, NHS staff walking out on strike?
Look, I don't think we want to see a strike, and I don't think nurses want to see a strike either. But the thing you've got to understand, Kate, is what's driven nurses to do this. And what's driven nurses to do this is 12 years of underfunding of the NHS, 12 years of their pay falling back, and a real crisis of morale in the NHS. So, I would point out, we were in power for 13 years. We never had a nurses' strike. That's because we were properly investing in the NHS. We were making sure that there was proper staffing of the NHS. So I'm afraid the government has itself to blame for having brought the NHS to this position where nurses feel so frustrated, so anguished, that it seems like they may be voting to go out on strike.
I'm interested that Ed Miliband, you're Ed Miliband. Keir Starmer appears to have said this morning that too many people from overseas are recruited into the NHS. Do you agree with that?
I think what he's saying is we should have our nurse training places here. Look, the problem is, and this is why we announced at our Labour Party conference that we would crack down on the so-called non-DOMS tax loophole to invest in nurse training places. Look, it's ridiculous that we are so short of staff that we've got to reach for recruiting from overseas when actually there are people who'd like to be nurses here and there aren't the places for them. So, yes, use overseas nurses if necessary, but also give people the opportunities for homegrown talent, when I think lots of people do want to go into nursing, but it does require the kind of investment that we're talking about.
And finally, both of us, Adam and I, are fascinated by this one. You've turned down Strictly Come Dancing in the past. I don't think it's the only reality TV show that you've turned down. Would you ever agree to do it? And do you think politicians should?
I can let you into a secret that I was asked to go on I'm a Celebrity, but I'm afraid I think it wasn't the I'm a Celebrity, it was the after show. And I must say that is, I think it's the after show, in a studio somewhere in the UK. So that shows how that shows kind of Matt Hancock's status above mine. Look, I think the truth is, you face a bit of a choice here, which is, are you a frontline politician or are you someone who's post their MP career? Now, my colleague Ed Balls has done a brilliant job in kind of inventing a new life for himself, firstly through Strictly and then through all of the other things he's doing, including TV documentaries and so on. I think the trouble with Matt Hancock's decision is he's sort of trying to have his cake and eat it, you might say. And I think that's the problem. His constituents, I've read some of his comments of his constituents, some of which are unrepeatable on a family show, to do with kangaroos.
Yes, let's not go down that
exactly.
road. I think cake won't be the only thing he's eating.
No, indeed. I think we both know what we're talking about. So I sort of think he's got to make a choice, really. I got asked to do all manner of things, some kind of bodybuilding thing, a rally drive. I mean, I know what you're thinking, Kay, which is you're certainly not the right person for the bodybuilding thing. Some kind of drive thing, rally driving. So have I got news? I kind of resisted.
Are there any that you would do? Is the one that you're holding out for?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, someone said to me the other day you should do Celebrity Bake Off, but I don't think so. I think I'm leaving the sort of culinary talent to my namesake, Mr. Balls. I think
there's a door open there. Ed Miliband.
It's a very narrow. I can tell you exclusively, I'm not going on the I'm a Celebrity after show to comment on Matt Hancock.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, never mind. Maybe Bake Off will come calling. Ed Miliband, thank you for your time this morning.
Take care. Cheers.